Part 177. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1761. The emperor received them very kindly, and said that it was not their fault. After all, the group was large, and it was possible for them to manage it improperly. Therefore, the emperor suggested that when the ethnic group is large, it should be divided into clans and have large branches. This is the principle of nature. Otherwise, if the crown of the tree is too large, it must rely on the main branch, and I am afraid that the main branch will be overwhelmed. No matter what the clan chiefs thought or what they would do afterwards, they responded with a smile at the time. I just heard that Yang Haoi had been waiting in the side hall for a day when he left. Kui Shi and several patriarchs looked at each other and walked away silently without saying anything. The emperor did not see Yang Haoi that day, and Yang Haoi could only return without success. And Yin Li and Tang He also began to hand over the case to Dali Temple, which was regarded as a close. No one knew how many people they had cleared from the palace. Even Tang He himself was not very sure, because in the end, many of the servants were no longer interrogating him, but Yin Li brought people to the West Inner Garden. Whether it has disappeared since then, or testified against other people, or went back quietly, as if nothing happened, just a change of master, I am afraid that except for Yin Li, only the emperor knows. Tang He handed in all the case files, and let it go. After 2 days of exhaustion, he could finally rest, so after returning home, he first took a day to spend with his wife and children. The next day happened to be a holiday. He took Mrs. Tang and the child to the Yang family as a guest. When the car arrived at the side entrance, he heard the sound of horses' hooves. He couldn't help but lift the curtains to look out, and saw Bai Shan and Zhou Man and Bai Cheng running on horses. Master Tang showed a smile, jumped off the carriage to look at them first, and asked, "How does it feel to ride on a cold day?" Man Bao said loudly, "Cool." After speaking, he couldn't help his nose itch, and then he sneezed heavily. When Master Tang saw it, he laughed, turned around and took the child out of the car, and then helped his wife to get out of the car. Man Bao and Bai Shan and Bai Erlang also dismounted, and the servants had already knocked on the door. Yang Hesha guessed that they were almost there too, and just in time to greet them, they smiled and said, "Come in, let's clean up a building." The brazier was built, and it's warm inside now. Man Bao and Madame Tang walked together and pulled Chi Ji into the yard before handing over the horse to the servants, exhorting, "It's cold, don't let it freeze outside." Madame Tang couldn't help but laugh, "I feel like your horse is more delicate than ours." When he got to the backyard, Bai Erlang asked, "Why not in Changxian?" Yang Hesha said, "The child is still young and can't blow the wind, so it's better to stay in the building. On the second floor, I only opened a window in the corner. If you want to enjoy the scenery, you can watch it there. Others can sit and roast meat. The light is good." Mrs. Yang held the children and waited for them at the entrance of the stairs. When she saw them coming, she turned around the children, let them see them, and coaxed them to recognize people. The child stared at everyone with round eyes, and finally set his eyes on Man Bao. He didn't know whether he recognized her or just because he liked her, so he reached out and yelled at her. Man Bao stepped forward and looked at him, smiled, "Wait until I wash my hands before hugging you." Madame Yang smiled and said, "You are more particular than me." Man Bao smiled and said, "I just pulled the reins and hugged the horse. He is still young, so it's not a bad thing to be careful." Yang Heshu asked the servants to bring them water to clean their hands. There were several braziers on the second floor, and there were marinated meat on the table. As soon as he went upstairs, Man Bao felt warm, so he took off his cloak and handed it to the servant. Only then did Mrs. Tang notice the big coat on her body, and she reached out and touched it and said, "It looks like duck feathers. Did you make it at home? There will be no sales outside." Man Bao smiled and said, "Grandma Lu gave it to me." Madame Tang envied, such a cloak is rare. She pulled Mrs. Yang and Man Bao and turned to talk behind the screen alone. There was a separate lounge for women's families. There were only 2 wooden basins in it, and refreshments were placed on the table. Madame Tang smiled and said, "Come on, let them go to the barbecue. We will sit and talk and eat ready-made meat later." Man Bao glanced at the room, walked to the window and opened it, then closed it again, took a wooden stick and placed it under the window, allowing the window to open a slit for ventilation. Madame Tang was stunned and asked, "What is this for? Can you still blow the wind in this cold day?" Man Bao said, "There are too many braziers in the house, let's breathe, otherwise it will be poisoned." The 2 ladies were very sensitive to this kind of thing and asked, "Why is it poisoned?" Before Man Bao could speak, the grandmother who was waiting by the side smiled and said, "The charcoal fire needs to open the window to let in some air, otherwise it will suffocate people, but Zhou Tai is relieved, there is a window outside, and this screen is again if there is no cap, nothing will happen." Man Bao smiled and said, "That's right, but there are so many braziers in the house that I feel too stuffy. It's better to open a slit here." Mammy wanted to say something, but Mrs. Yang suddenly said, "Man Bao is right, I also feel that my breath is better now." Mammy said, "But madam, young master can't catch cold." Mrs. Yang smiled and said, "He's holding Yan Shide, and he won't blow the wind. It's even worse when he's stuffy. Yingyu, you can open another window as well." Yingyu responded and turned to open the window. Mammy hesitated, looking at Madame Yang's face and saying nothing. Man Bao took the rattle on the table and shook it to tease the child. The child was attracted by the sound of dong dong dong, and even Mrs. Tang's son ran in from outside to see it. Seeing that the 2 children liked it, Man Bao simply took out another one from the table, stuffed one for each person, and let them rock and play by themselves. It's a pity that Chi Geer is still young, and she is still lying in the arms of people. She is shaking the rattle in her hand. It can't be shaken several times, so she throws the rattle out in a fit of temper. Madame Tang looked speechless and asked, "Who does this temper look like?" "It doesn't look like you either." Mrs. Yang smiled embarrassedly, "Husband said it looks like when he was a child." Man Bao didn't believe it, "Brother Yang has a good temper." Mrs. Yang smiled and said, "My husband said that he was a skinny boy when he was a child, so we want to wait for the child to grow up. It's okay to have a temper now. When he can walk and talk, we will teach him slowly, always. Can be taught." Tang He sat cross-legged on the fur-covered wooden couch, and when he heard their words in the screen, he turned his head and smiled at Yang Heshu, "This is not easy to teach. Bai Shan and Bai Erlang have already started roasting meat." Hearing this, they asked curiously, "Did Yang Xuexian have a great temper when he was a child?" Tang He shook his head and said, "That temper is not small, isn't it quite big now? It's just superficial, so don't be deceived by him." Yang Heshu looked up at them and smiled gently. Tang He turned his head to the 2 and said, "It's fake, don't believe it." Bai Erlang was stunned for a moment, then patted his thigh and shouted, "I see, just like Bai Shan now, it's just a fake. Good night." The last day and half of the night, ask for a monthly ticket, this is true, not fake. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1762. Bai Shan raised his eyes and gave him a warning glance. Bai Erlang pointed at him and Tang He Yang He Shu and said, "Did you see it, threatened me." Tang He couldn't help patting his legs and laughing loudly, "That's it, I hate it." Yang Heshu said helplessly, "Don't teach the 2 children bad." Tang He said, "I'm talking about you, why is it my responsibility again?" Yang Heshu reached out and added 2 pieces of charcoal to the brazier with a clip, and said with a smile, "I'm obviously very gentle, and you're making up my rumors." Tang He turned his head and asked Bai Er, Do you understand how I have felt over the years now? Bai Erlang hesitated. I understand, but brother Yang is indeed very gentle. Yang Hesha couldn't help but burst out laughing. Bai Shan has already roasted the meat, put it directly on the plate and stuffed it into Bai Erlang's hands, send it to sister-in-law and Man Bao. Bai Erlang took them in and sent them in. Only when he went in did he realize that Bai Shan was disgusting and embarrassing him. He pouted unhappily, put down the plate, and went back to find Bai Shan to settle accounts. The topic outside had changed. On the other hand, Man Bao asked curiously while eating the meat, Brother Yang was naughty when he was a child. Mrs. Yang said embarrassedly, in my impression, the husband has always been very gentle, but he has a very good idea. Basically, it is difficult for others to change his decision. Mrs. Tang nodded and said, not only is she naughty, but she has a great temper. She lowered her voice and tried not to let people outside hear, I lose my temper if I don't like it. I didn't know why he wanted to be nice to him before. Madame Yang was unhappy, and said softly, my husband is smart and valuable. Even if she was her cousin, Mrs. Tang would not agree with her words. She snorted and said, it's he who has been coaxing him, okay. Although Mrs. Yang's voice was gentle, she said firmly, my husband is gentle and elegant, I have seen my cousin-in-law angry. Man Bao was sandwiched between the two of them, looking to the left and then to the right, always feeling a little scared, so he quietly got up and slipped away. Seeing her slipping out, Tang He asked curiously, what are you mumbling about inside? Man Bao looked up at him meaningfully, then shook his head and said, it's nothing, let's have a barbecue, I want to eat meat. The people in the inner room of the screen don't know if there is a final result. Anyway, it took a while for them to bring the child out, with smiles on their faces. Madame Tang shoved her son to Master Tang, found a place to sit down, turned her head and asked Man Bao, why did you escape? Man Bao made an excuse, I want to eat meat. Mrs. Tang turned her head to look at the sky and asked, it's not noon yet, didn't you eat breakfast when you left the palace in the morning? Is the food in the palace bad? I sees he too. He lost a lot of weight, how many days did he eat in the palace? Tang He immediately said, the food is still okay, I'm tired. Mrs. Tang asked casually, is this case over, do you want to enter the palace in the future? Tang He shook his head, it's already been handed over to Dali Temple, and the rest is none of my business. Madame Tang looked at Yang Heshu and was about to ask if it had any influence on him, when he suddenly raised his head and said to the servants serving in the room, there are too many people here, stay for a few Yingyu, Mammy take the others back, the yard also needs people to watch. Mammy was about to speak when Yang Heshu's cold eyes fell on her, and they looked at her so quietly. Mammy's heart froze, and she quickly lowered her head to avoid Yang Heshu's gaze, gave a low reply, and then led the person to retreat. Yingyu watched people go downstairs, and even went downstairs to make sure that people were far away and closed the door directly. Tang He was stunned and asked, this is from your stepmother? How could you use the person she gave? No, Yang Heshu said indifferently, it was given by my father, saying that it is very good to take care of children, so I accepted it. Tang He frowned slightly. Obviously, this servant is not very obedient, otherwise Yang Heshu would not behave like this. Bai Shan raised his head and glanced at the building. Seeing that all of them were left behind by each other's henchmen, he asked Yang Heshu without any hesitation, are you planning to leave the capital? Yang Heshu smiled, nodded slightly and said, I have this plan, it's already in operation, and I'm free recently, let's get together more. Man Bao didn't expect that he would really leave, and his mood was a little down for a while. When Yang Heshu saw it, he reached out and patted her head, sometimes when we meet, you and I are both officials in the court. There will always be times when we meet again, so don't be disappointed. Tang He was more open than they thought, and said with a smile, What's the sadness? With his ability, we can see each other again in a few years. Yang Hesha nodded with a smile, and seemed not at all saddened by this release. Man Bao raised his head and asked, is it a promotion or an equalization? Yang Hesha said, it doesn't matter. Man Bao sighed and said, that's because the demoted official was transferred. Yang Hesha laughed, how did you become an official fan? Even Bai Erlang knows, only high can you gain weight, and what weight say only works. Both Yang Heshu and Tang He looked at him in surprise, you have grown up. Bai Erlang became complacent, that's natural. Bai Shan asked, where are you going? Yang Heshu said, the Xiaohu is tentatively set, but the details have to wait a little longer. The Ministry of Officials has not agreed. But since he said it, it is obvious that the matter has been roughly settled. Man Bao calculated the distance to Xiaohu and felt that it wasn't very far, so he became happy and asked, are you going to go to school? Yang Hesha glanced at Mrs. Kui, smiled and nodded and said, it will take a new year to take office, so I have to hand over everything I have to do. By then, the child will be a little older, so I will take office with me. Seeing Yang Hesha smile all the time, Man Bao could also feel that he was really calm, not as frustrated and resentful as she thought, so he scratched his head and asked, Brother Yang, isn't it sad to be demoted? A smile flashed in Yang Hesha's eyes and said, I'm not very sad, but if it were you, I would probably cry. Man Bao couldn't help but move his body and muttered, I'm also mentally strong. Yang Hesha smiled and said, I'm not a fan of fame and fortune, and I'm young. I originally wanted to go out for a few more years to see the people's livelihood and customs in various places. No matter where I go out, there will be more opportunities in the future. Bai Erlang couldn't help Crow's mouth, what if he stays in office and cannot be reused in the future? Yang Hesha said confidently, I still have the talent for promotion, and your majesty employs people with great talents. There was another sentence he didn't say, and the prince was not someone who would avenge private revenge. He admitted that he had been working with the prince quite happily during this time. He is young, and there will be more opportunities in the future. And there is no such thing as smooth sailing in life. He doesn't feel that the setback is so uncomfortable, but he is afraid that it will be others who will suffer. See you at 4 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1763. Yang Haoyi is really uncomfortable at this moment. It should be said that the Yang family is not feeling well at this time, and Yang Rong is still in prison at this time. Yin Li and Tang He did not find direct evidence of Yang Rong's involvement, and his housekeeper Yu Shui took over everything, as if the emperor had nothing to do with him. But everyone is not a fool, and the case is not only based on confessions, but everyone will think whether it is good or not. Why did Yu Shui, a housekeeper, kill the crown princess and the emperor's grandson? Where did he have the courage to put so many people in the palace? Everyone thought with their toes and knew that he was instigated by someone, but it was just who was behind it. Whether Yang Rong pleads guilty or not, it has a great influence on the Yang family. He was already devastated, but Yang Heshu was still resigning at this time, and he would not hesitate to be transferred to Xiaohu to be the county magistrate of Yizhong County, but he would also leave Beijing. You must know that after he returned to Beijing, he was already an official of the 5th rank because of his successive meritorious deeds. The Beijing official was transferred to the outside world, not to mention promotion, he also took the initiative to go down to the 6th rank. What is the difference between this and directly confessing on behalf of the Yang family? But that kid has a big idea and doesn't listen to advice. Yang Haoyi had a headache. He sighed and pushed open the window to look at the vast expanse of white outside. He vaguely heard laughter coming from the garden, so he summoned a servant to ask, What's going to happen next? The servant bowed and said, Master is entertaining guests in the garden. Yang Haoyi frowned and asked, Who is there? There are young Master Tang, the two sons of the Bai family and the young lady of the Zhou family. Yang Haoyi knew who it was as soon as he heard it. He frowned and waved his hand. I know, you go. As soon as the people here left, the butler over there rushed in and whispered in his ear, the fifth prince has left the palace. Yang Haoyi's eyes lit up and asked in a low voice, with whom? With the two princesses and the sixth prince. They came out of the palace to see the fifth prince's palace, and they are in the palace at the moment. The fifth prince opens his mansion next year to say his marriage, and he gets married the year after, and he will go to the fief after marrying a daughter-in-law, so his royal mansion is already under construction. Originally, he was supposed to get married and open a mansion this year, but the emperor had no money in his inner treasury this year. Although the fifth son was a concubine, the emperor still loved him a lot, so he was reluctant to give him an empty mansion and deliberately postponed it for a year. Now that the autumn harvest is over, the various harvests of the imperial city have been sent to the inner treasury, and the emperor has money again, so it is reorganized. Today, the fifth prince brought his three younger brothers and sisters out of the palace to visit his palace. Yang Haoyi immediately got up and left the mansion, wanting to see him. He went out on the front foot, and carefully went up to the observation tower on the back foot. Qin Muo leaned over and reported to Yang Heshu in a low voice. The teacup in Yang Heshu's hand paused, and he unconsciously turned it around twice. After putting it down, he nodded to Qin Muo and asked him to follow carefully. Tang he knew him best, but when he saw his actions, he knew that he had committed his old problems again. He couldn't help but turn his head and ask him, Who are you looking for? Yang Heshu looked up at him and didn't answer. Tang he shrugged and said, It's fine if you don't say anything. Yang Heshu was silent, and Man Bao three children sat aside, eating meat with innocent eyes looking at this and that, pretending to know nothing, and minimizing their sense of existence. Even Mrs. Tang and Mrs. Yang didn't speak. After a long time, Yang Heshu suddenly said, My father is out, do you want to check further? Master Tang, who was eating meat, was choked at once. The meat in his throat couldn't go down, and he was blocked by him. He could only look at Man Bao with tears in his eyes. Man Bao hurriedly put down the meat in his hand, ran up to press the person and bent over, and then patted him and lifted it up. Master Tang's belly was filled with gas, he couldn't help opening his mouth wide, and the meat in his throat flew out. When Yang Heshu and the others who were in a hurry saw it, they immediately stopped worrying, exhaled, and sat down in their respective places. Tang Run, who was running around the field, breathed a sigh of relief and sighed like an adult, Dad, you are too careless. Tang he glared at his son, then turned to stare at Yang Heshu. Yang Heshu sighed and said, It seems that the fifth prince has left the palace, and he is going to see the fifth prince. Tang he took a sip of tea and asked, What is Uncle Shi doing? Yang Heshu lowered his eyes and looked at the teacup in his hand, and said after a while, If the noble concubine and the fifth prince in the palace take the initiative to recognize this matter, then this matter has nothing to do with the Yang family. Tang he frowned, According to my investigation and Lord Yin, not only the fifth prince, but also concubine Yang Gui didn't know about it. Yang Heshu cocked the corners of his mouth, Yeah, this is the luck of the Yang family, but it's a pity that his father doesn't understand. Master Tang was speechless for a while. He is an outsider, and in the long run, this is indeed the luck of the Yang family, but I am afraid that as a member of the Yang family, Yang Haoyi will not think so. Not everyone can look at 20 or 30 years, and then temporarily put aside the interests of the past 10 years. Tang he couldn't sit still. After all, this was his own case, even if it had already been handed over to Dali Temple. Man Bao sat back in his seat with a puzzled look on his face. What does this mean? Does Lord Yang want the fifth prince and concubine Yang to recognize the detailed work? Bai Erlang said, They are not stupid, Why did they suffer on their behalf? Yang Heshe said, there are many reasons, either by interests, or by feelings, or by being deceived by the other party. People always do things that are incredible to others. For example, at this time, Yang Heshe laughed at himself. Why should I tell you what my father is doing wrong? And tell him with Tang He. The crowd was silent. Bai Shan hesitated, for justice. Man Bao and Bai Erlang looked at Yang Heshe with bright eyes, and their eyes were asking, is that right? Yeah. Other people. Then Yang Heshe nodded brazenly under the eyes of Tang He and his wife, and said with a smile, not bad. The three Bai Shan breathed a sigh of relief and looked at Yang Heshe with admiration. Mrs. Yang sat quietly beside him, but moved slightly closer to him. Tang He and Mrs. Tang both thought he was extremely shameless. But Man Bao really admires Yang Heshe. It is easy to say it out righteously, but it is too difficult to do it. After all, she thinks that if her father does something wrong, she will stop her and make amends. She will admit her fault on her father's behalf, but it is a little difficult to take the initiative to report her father to the government. No wonder senior brother Yang hesitated for so long just now. Bai Shan and Bai Erlang also put themselves in their shoes and thought about it, and admired Yang Heshe even more. Bai Shan even poured a full cup of tea and said, Brother Yang, I will toast you with tea instead of wine. If I go to Xiaohu in the future, I will definitely bring you a lot of delicious food. Yang Heshe raised his glass with a smile, then I'll wait for your delicious food. Tang He was too lazy to pierce him, thought for a moment and said, even if concubine Yang Gui is for the fifth prince, she won't agree, right? Yang Heshe said, then it depends on my aunt's heart, whether the son is more important, or the mother's family is more important. Or, my father was so eloquent that he was able to convince their mother and son. Bai Shan said confidently, no, the fifth prince is not stupid. If he recognizes this, what will he do in the future? See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1764. It won't do anything, Yang Heshe said, he will say that His Majesty has already found out the whole story and knows that this matter has nothing to do with your mother and son, but there is no solid evidence to prove that it was your uncle who did it. Your mother and son took the initiative to respond. The emperor has always spoiled children, he knows that you are worried about your uncle, and he will only feel sorry for you, thinking that you are innocent and filial, so how can he blame you? Yang Heshe said, even if you are angry, it is temporary. After the new year, the more filial your highness is, the better your majesty will be. You can see from His Majesty's treatment of the third prince that no matter how wrong your sons are, they are still sons. Tiger poison does not eat children, not to mention your majesty. Do you pamper the fifth prince? Bai Shan and the others were dumbfounded. If they hadn't seen the silent expressions on Yang Heshe's face, they would have almost believed these words. Yang Heshe could almost guess his father's expression when he said these words. He sighed softly. The imperial concubine entered the palace early, she has a lot of affection for the Yang family, and her cousin is also a brother and sister, so I'm not sure. Man Bao is concerned about another matter. Speaking of which, she has not yet determined who the enemies of Suyu and Suan are. So those fine works in the palace were all cultivated by Yang Rong. Master Tang didn't speak, how could the case be exposed casually? Yang Heshe didn't have much scruples, and smiled, I'm afraid it's not just the Yang Rong family, there are other families, such as the Kui family, the Wang family, and the Lu family, and this family is divided into many families, such as my Yang family, that incident. My father should not be involved, but there must be his staff in the palace. Man Bao asked blankly, why? There are too many reasons, Yang Heshe said. I can't say right or wrong. If you really ask why, it should be for the entire family. He said, I don't expect them to do anything, just be a good errand. In the future, if there are women in the Yang family's harem, they can use these people's hands, or if there is a disaster for the Yang family in the future, they can warn one or two, and the rest the only thing is to ask for some news. Man Bao asked in disbelief, is this not wrong? Yang Hesha smiled slightly and said, do you think every family's family is clean? My family also has ears and eyes from other people's houses, not to mention a lot of eyes and ears in the palace. They don't intend to harm us at this time, but they are just prepared for anything. Whether it is right or wrong, it has to go back hundreds of years. Not only Man Bao, but also Bai Shan and Bai Erlang, who came from aristocratic families, were stunned. Do you also have meticulous works in your family? Yang Hesha smiled and nodded and said, naturally, other people may not have it. My family is a clan leader. When the previous dynasty was in chaos, we had 70,000 or 80,000 trilogy in his hands. How could it be that there are all loyal people here? He did not shy away from saying in front of the three of them, this has been the case in all dynasties and dynasties. The monarch and his ministers can both gain each other, and they can also attack and defend each other. But your majesty has the world in mind, and we people should not only see the glory of the family, but also look at the people outside the clan, and look at Kinkaiu. Yang Heshu looked at Bai Shan and Man Bao with approval, perhaps the two of you can understand the most. Since the goal of the ruler and the minister is the same, that is, the ruler and the minister will govern the world together, and mutual trust should come first. Today, people should be based on their merits, and the ruler should follow the ruler's way. The minister should also do his best, and the world will naturally be at peace. My cousin and father have overstepped. Tang He looked at him in surprise. This was the first time he heard him say such a thing. He couldn't help sitting up slightly and asked, you really think so? The people of the world are more important than your family? Yang Hesha nodded slightly, glanced at Bai Shan and Zhou Man, and said, I remember you two told me that after 100 years, people are all withered bones, and after 100 years, the descendants should have 5 clothes, and another 100 years, I don't know where the blood relationship has faded long ago, thousands of years ago, didn't people all come from Yanhuang? Instead of having such a narrow vision, only looking at the interests of one family, it is better to look at the interests of the whole world. Bai Shan and Man Bao looked confused, pointed to their noses and asked, what did we say? Yang Heshu frowned, tilted his head and asked, don't you remember, that year's autumn harvest, I went to Kilai village to inspect and saw you harvesting rice in the fields, and you stopped work and rested in the shed at noon. There are many small stories on it, one of which is Cao asking Sun Yu, which is more important than the monarchy? Sun Yu replied that it was the family, which is what you said at the time. Bai Shan and Man Bao looked at each other and felt that their memory was a bit poor for the first time. The two of them looked at Bai Erlang together and wondered, what did we say? Neither of them remembered, nor did Bai Erlang remember. Seeing that they really forgot, Yang Hesha smiled and said, forget it, although that book is an unofficial history and the story is made up, but what it said is right, and it is true for the vast majority of people in this world. In other words, the family is indeed more important than the monarchy. After thinking about it, Man Bao said, I don't think so. Bai Shan also said, that's not right. Yang Heshu reached out and patted their shoulders, smiling slightly. Zhou Man did not come from an aristocratic family, and his ethnic group was small, so there were not many disputes. And Bai Shan has lived away from his family since he was a child, and his family has little influence on him, so in this world, the two of them who understand him the most at this point are probably the two of them. He turned his head to look at Tang He and asked, are you going to see the fifth prince? Tang He was tangled, hesitated for a while and then got up, I'll go take a look. Mrs. Tang stopped him and looked at Yang Heshu with disapproval, Uncle Shi is your father after all, should you persuade him? Yang Heshu sighed and shook his head slightly. Tang He quickly explained to Mrs. Tang, Changbo didn't mean to harm me, he must have persuaded me. I went over and didn't say a word, and uncle she would not say such things to the fifth prince again when he saw me. Moreover, Yang Haoyi is not stupid, why did he go there? I am afraid that he would guess that Yang Hesha told him that at that time, there would still be a conflict between their father and son, and Yang Haoyi would go to Yang Hesha when he was angry. So he didn't mean to hurt him. But Mrs. Tang just dragged him and lowered her voice, my father told you to be more honest recently, how many ears and eyes did you pick on others, and you still don't know how to restrain yourself at this time. Man Bao and Bai Shan had all kinds of questions in their little heads, and there were endless questions to ask. Because they asked for advice, they volunteered, let's go, we are also friends with the fifth prince, and we are the same age, so go find him. It's best to play, but I still have many questions, who can tell me? Seeing that Yang Heshu and Tang He were both looking at her, she twisted her body uncomfortably and said, of course, it's not that we want to inquire about privacy, but we just think that if the fifth prince has any questions, we can answer them. That's right, Bai Shan said, in case the fifth prince must ask who is killing the crown princess and the grandson, we can't answer the same as Yang Shuexiang just now, all the fine works found in the palace are so general. Answer. In fact, the relationship between the monarchy, the aristocratic family and the concubine has always been complicated. You say that the aristocratic family is not good, and many policies that weaken the aristocratic family from the perspective of the people are proposed by officials from the aristocratic family. You say that the aristocratic family is good, they have always invading people's living space. See you in the next chapter at 11 o'clock at night. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1765. Hearing this, Yang Hesha couldn't help laughing. He leaned on the back leaning behind him relaxedly, nodded and said with a smile, then ask, and I'll tell you everything I know. Bai Shan and Man Bao glanced at each other, and Bai Shan asked, is Suyu the work of your family? Yang Hesha shook his head, glanced at Tang He and said, if I guess correctly, she should have been specially trained by my great uncle and sent to the palace, and there should be many people who went in with her. The fifth prince was only 2 or 3 years old at that time. Well, he is preparing for the future. Bai Erlang, who had been at a loss, had given up asking questions, widened his eyes, understood what he said, and couldn't help but blurted out, is the fifth prince going to fight for the throne? Yang Hesha couldn't help laughing, shook his head and said, he's a 2 or 3-year-old baby, he knows what a fight for the throne is. It was just prepared for him by his grandfather, just in case. He can't really have this in the future. Will you prepare manpower only when you have the ability or the idea? It is said that each family will send people to the palace for the future. They can afford this kind of effort, just look at the opportunities in the future, and it will be the best if they can become natural. Bai Erlang has not yet figured it out, Bai Shan has already turned his mind, thinking of what Yang Heshu and Tang He said just now. He said, the fifth prince doesn't mean this, so Yang Rong is trying to force the fifth prince to fight. Yang Heshu didn't answer this question and kept silent. But silence speaks volumes. Man Bao and Bai Shan frowned together and asked, what do you mean by Lord Yang? This time Yang Heshu replied, my father has no intention of participating. Bai Erlang breathed a sigh of relief, patted his chest and said, it's okay, it's okay. Everyone turned to look at him together, and Man Bao said irritably, shut up. Bai Shan directly picked up a plate of roasted meat on the table and stuffed it in his hand, hurry up. Bai Erlang held the plate with a depressed expression. There is no intention of participating, not opposing, that is, he is letting it go. Yang Hesha did not shy away from this point, and said, he thought he could attack and retreat, but he could immediately withdraw and leave, but he didn't expect that he and Yang Rong were involved too deeply, and it was difficult to tear them apart at this time. He looked at Tang He and asked, "If I'm not mistaken, some of the spies you found in the palace this time were placed inside by my father, right?" Tang He didn't nod, but he didn't shake his head. He couldn't leak the secret, but he didn't say anything. Yang Hesha turned to Bai Shan and Zhou Man and nodded. "It's hard for Suyu to get in touch with those people, and it's even harder to find them. I'm more inclined to think that the reason why they can find people is because Yang Rong's spies betrayed my father or my grandfather to plant them." "People who go in." Tang He took a sip from the teacup and quietly gave him an approving look. Madame Tang was so angry that she reached out and twisted his thigh. Master Tang hissed, and in the crowd, he didn't dare to cry out. Man Bao suddenly thought of something and asked, "Those spies have such hard mouths, haven't they confessed anything?" Yang Hesha took a sip of tea. Tang He looked around, and seeing that everyone was looking at him, he could only vaguely say, "It's not." Even if he confesses, there are not many people who know who the master of his family is. Yang Hesha did not embarrass him, and said directly on his behalf, "For example, Suyu, she does not know who she is serving. But this does not mean that Dali Temple there is no way to take them. Even if there is a small amount of confession and evidence, but if it makes sense, they can be indicted. For example, Yu Shui is Yang Rong's housekeeper. As long as it is confirmed that it is Suyu who is instructed by Yu Shui, even if he takes all the responsibility on himself, and makes any excuse to say that he just wants to harm the prince and princess, Dali Temple will not let her. Should I blame Yang Rong or will I blame Yang Rong? This is reasonable. Yu Shui is the housekeeper of his house. It's not because they say it's irrelevant. Who can fool even a fool if he doesn't believe it? So they have to find a first sin for the emperor. As the aunt of Yang Mansion on Shui Le Street, concubine Yang Gui can naturally instruct Yu Shui to do things for her, and she is the most suitable person to take the blame. Yang Hesha said to the two of them, "If you are going to see the fifth prince, you can tell him directly that my father and Yang Rong are too involved. Once Yang Rong is interrogated, my father may be implicated by him, so he persuaded them to recognize their mother and son." This. Bai Shan was very curious. Why is brother Yang unwilling to save Lord Yang? Yang Hesha smiled bitterly and said, "I am here to save him. The strong man broke his wrist, although he lost one arm, but he saved the others, so he can get back on his feet. If he does this, not only will he be trapped in a quagmire, but also the entire Yang family will be dragged into it. Abyss." In this situation, if last year, the prince had no son, and he was still so irritable, giving up on himself and ignoring political affairs, he would consider pushing it and let the prince and Prince Gong lose both and then push the fifth prince to the throne. But this year, the crown prince not only had a child, but his temperament also slowly returned to the past. He regained the support of the courtiers, and the emperor and empress dote on him again. The chance of the fifth prince is slim, not to mention that the fifth prince himself does not have that kind of mind. The slim chance is gone. Yang Hesha disliked the hardships of strong men the most. Since the fifth prince did not have that heart, Yang Rong was very displeased in pulling the fifth prince into the water so deliberately. He was inconvenient to tell Zhou Man and others a lot of things, and he couldn't even say it to his wife and friends, because that was the most despicable plan in each family's heart. All the families, especially the Kui family, disliked the prince very much. The prince's methods are the same as today. No matter how friendly and forbearing they are on the face, they can't change the same decisiveness and arrogance in the heart of the prince and the emperor. He can see that in the next 20 years at least, the prince will reintroduce official studies like His Majesty, expand the imperial examinations, and further reduce the measures to determine the quality of officials. It will not be repaired again. The Kui family has been downgraded from the first class to the third class. There are not a few wealthy families occupying fertile fields from all over the world. It's opening up. Even the future that he can see, all of his uncles who are friends with him must also see it. Obviously, they want a king who can rule the world with them. However, the things that the emperor and the crown prince wanted to do were also what Yang Heshu wanted to do, except for the one about rebuilding the clan history. So in his opinion, his political views with the emperor and the crown prince are consistent, and with his father. Yang Heshu sighed, turned to look at the sky outside the window and said, "Do you have anything else to ask? If not, just get up and go over. It should be just right now." "Yes." Man Bao raised his hand and asked earnestly, "If the fifth prince is not guilty, how will Dali Temple sentence Yang Rong in the end, and those who put spies in the palace?" Yang Heshu thought for a while and said, "Maybe some land will be confiscated, Yang Rong, maybe he will be exiled." Yang Heshu, originally, I could have the power of the dragon, but it seems that someone has destroyed it. In the last few hours of June, it is a waste to keep the monthly pass until tomorrow. Let's take a look at Yang Myron, who has lost her life from Long Jigong again. Please vote for a monthly pass to comfort him. Man Bao, good night. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1766. The three of them were disappointed. Is it just confiscating some land? Tang He said angrily, if there is no evidence, they will lose some fine works. Even if the land is confiscated, they have to find other charges. Do you think it is easy? He said, if you find out the crime, it depends on whether they admit it or not. If they do not admit it, if you want to take the land from their hands, it is like going to the sky. This time it is they who are wrong, and they feel guilty, so His Majesty can take the opportunity to find some excuses to confiscated some land. Otherwise, after a fight, how can they not know in the end? But the officials and people in the middle don't know how many people will die. Tang He pointed to his nose and said, I'm hiding now if you don't see me, so be careful when going in and out, for fear that one day someone will hit and die in front of my horse when I go out, and then I'll have to meet you in prison. Man Bao shrank back and asked, then what should I do? Tang He pointed at Yang Heshu and said, isn't he protecting you? For a few days, let Wan Tian follow your car to the imperial physician's office, and at the cusp of this storm, he called us all to eat roast venison. Man Bao stared, Wanchen followed my car? Why didn't I know? Tang He glanced at Bai Shan with a smile, and said, there are still many things you don't know. Yang Heshu also smiled, not shy, and pointed directly at Bai Shandao, he asked me for help. Man Bao glanced at Bai Shan, and resigned himself, then, is it still appropriate for us to see the fifth prince? Yang Heshu. Tang He laughed when he heard the words. Yang Heshu said helplessly, you should just go to the fifth prince to play. If you don't want to say something, you can quietly remind the fifth prince to come to me. His relationship with his father has been a little stiff recently, and it is not easy to conflict with him in front of outsiders. Otherwise, it will only be bad for the Yang family, not good. Once the Yang family is on the decline, I am afraid that the emperor has not done anything, and other families will do it first. So the fifth prince can come to him, but he can't find the fifth prince at this time. Bai Shan took a sip of tea, put down the teacup and got up, let's go, it's almost time now, let's go and see. Tang He was thinking about whether or not to join in the fun. Mrs. Tang glared at him secretly and said, you go, we are here to eat and wait for your news. The three responded, turned around and ran away. Anyway, they came on horseback, and it was easy to go out. The fifth prince's palace was not very far from here, and they arrived in less than 2/4 of an hour on horseback. The three of them put on their cloaks, greeted Daji and the others who were waiting in front, and left. Daji saw that they came out so quickly and was still in a hurry, thinking that they had quarreled with someone, but when he saw that their faces were faintly excited, he felt different. After waiting for the horses to run for a while, they pulled the reins and let the three horses come together to whisper, "The family is terrible." Bai Shan said, "It's all for the sake of profit, I can't argue, I can't scold, it's right that brother Yang doesn't struggle much, I can't argue with those people, and I can't argue with Yang Ho yet." Bai Erlang nodded, "That's right, as I told my husband, the rotten wood is rotten, and no matter how much you teach the other party, it will be a waste of effort, so it's better not to carve." Man Bao pulled the horse and said, "Let's go, then let's go find good wood that can be carved." The 5 princes who can be carved are being held by Yang Houi to speak at the moment. He sighed, "Those fine works were sent to the palace when your grandfather was there. They were originally for your mother and your staff, but there was no time. Who would have thought that your uncle suddenly wanted to miss the step?" The 5th prince did not speak with a sullen face. Yang Houi looked at his face, didn't say those words to him, but said, "It's inconvenient at home now, it's not easy to enter the palace, I don't know how the empress and you are in the palace." The 5th prince's face softened a little, and said, "The mother-in-law cried several times and interceded with the father no longer comes to see the mother, but the queen came twice, and the mother was appeased. I feel a lot better after a while." The 5th prince didn't want to ask, but thinking that his uncle has always been good to him, he still couldn't help but ask, "Is it really my uncle who wants to kill Ying's slave?" Yang Houi sighed, "He's doing this for you too." The face of the 5th prince changed greatly, and he shouted, "What is it for me? The elder brother of the prince is the eldest son. Even if it is not the elder brother of the prince, there are still 3 brothers and 4 brothers. How can he think like this? Don't be afraid, your highness, your majesty knows that this matter was done by him alone, and has nothing to do with you." Lord Yang reassured him and said, "Your majesty still loves his highness very much, and you will know that this time your highness and empress are not involved. It's just a pity that your uncle is still in prison. I don't know if he is alive or dead." The 5th prince opened his mouth and said after a while, "Didn't you say that Yu Shui is unwilling to do anything? Has he already taken all the blame? He is just a subordinate, saying that everything is his own opinion and not reasonable. Yang Rong will definitely be questioned, depending on the crime, if your majesty is willing to open the door and say that he can't be taken alone, otherwise, Yang Rong in Shul Street will be punished. I'm afraid everyone in the house will be implicated. Sai, your cousin's nephew is only 2 years old, if he is implicated, I don't know if he will survive." The 5th prince opened his mouth. Yang Houi did not pursue the victory, but took out a letter. "This is my letter to the empress. Now the palace is strictly controlled, and it is difficult to deliver the news from the outside, so I can only ask you to send it back, right? Now, your palace has been built, it should be opened next year, right?" The 5th prince took it in a daze and nodded. Yang Houi smiled and said, "Opening the house is a great event, there are many places where money is needed, I will have someone send you some money later, and you have to arrange the furnishings in the house to your liking, which will cost a lot." The 5th prince bowed his head a little embarrassedly, "Uncle, isn't that bad? What's wrong? Your mother is my cousin. If your uncle really wants something, I will take care of you in the future. Isn't it right for your uncle to take care of your nephew?" Yang Houi reached out and patted him the shoulder, said, "Okay, you go to play first, it is rare to go out of the palace, you have to have fun, right? Do you have enough money?" Although the 5th prince said enough, Yang Houi took off the money bag and stuffed it into his hand, so that he could go shopping on the main street when he had time. Buying something for the empress will also make her happy, don't be too bored. The 5th prince nodded again and again, and personally sent the person out of the side gate of the palace. After watching the person leave, he turned to go back to the palace, and then he heard the sound of horses' hoofs. He glanced back curiously, and saw that not far away, Bai Shan and Zhou Man Baicheng restrained their horses to give way to Lord Yang, and when the horses of Lord Yang and his party passed, they rushed towards him. The three Bai Shan jumped off their horses, looked at him up and down, and looked at the purse he was holding in his hand, surprised. You won't be bribed, right? The fifth prince frowned, stuffed the money into his sleeve, and asked, what does this mean? See you at 4 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1767. Man Bao cleared his throat and said solemnly, we are here to find you on the request of Brother Yang. Bai Shan stopped Man Bao, looked left and right, and asked, they're all in front of your house, so why don't you invite us in? The fifth prince turned around to let them in, and said, Mingda and Changjiao are also there. They and the sixth are walking around. I will take you to find them. And Mr. Yang, who was far away, also walked slower, turned his head slightly, just saw them following the fifth prince into the door. He frowned slightly. How did they come? Are they invited by the fifth prince? Where does the servant know? However, he still replied, Princess Mingda and Princess Changjiao are friends with them, maybe they were invited by the two princesses. Yang Haoyi nodded, ran forward for a while and then realized that something was wrong. He restrained the horse and said, aren't they guests at our house? The servant was also stunned for a moment, and hesitantly said, it may be that the uncle has finished entertaining, so. The servant can't go on, it's noon now, it's lunchtime, how could the uncle be rude to let people leave? Yang Haoyi held the reins in his hand, sat on the horse for a while, and finally turned the horse's head back. At this time, Bai Shan and the others entered his palace with the fifth prince, and they looked around to visit, where in this garden are you talking more confidentially? Fifth prince. He put his hands together and asked, if you have anything, just talk about it here. Is there anything you shouldn't tell outsiders? The three of them stood opposite the fifth prince, watching him open his mouth, and suddenly some did not know how to open his mouth. The fifth prince looked strange, is there anything else you can't say? Man Bao muttered, it's like we have thick skin. I don't know if you are thick-skinned or not, but you guys are really brave. The fifth prince waited for a while, and seeing that they were still fighting a lawsuit, he simply asked, you are coming here uninvited, right? So if you have something to say, speak up. Bai Shan and the others were not used to procrastination, so they simply said, Brother Yang asked us to come, he wants us to remind you, don't believe what Yang Haoyi said. The fifth prince looked inexplicable, my cousin told me not to believe what his father said. Normal people would not believe this. The fifth prince looked at them suspiciously. Bai Erlang was irritated by him, and said unhappily, could we still lie to you? Bai Shan, who was about to explain in detail, saw the fifth prince on the opposite side fell silent, looked at them back and forth with a pair of eyes, and said after a while, although you are daring, you are not going to lie to me. Bai Shan and Man Bao turned their heads to look at Bai Erlang together. Both of them were very strange. The two of them were about to talk about it in detail when they saw the fifth prince's servant Ziobu running back from the side door, and whispered back, His Royal Highness, Yang Hoye is back again, he wants to see you. Bai Shan said, we just came out from senior brother Yang. Yang Hoye must have remembered that we were guests in Yang Mansion today. It is lunchtime, we will not stay in Yang Mansion for dinner, he must be suspicious. Fifth prince, what are you making troubles? Why did he hear that his cousin and uncle were fighting? Man Bao simply slammed him, I've come here, why don't you take Mingda Changjiao and the others to the Yang residence? Just say I'm hungry and want to eat from my uncle's house. The fifth prince was alert, took a step back and said, can't I come to the door right now? After all, his father Huang is angry with the Yang family. If he goes, what if his father thinks he is supporting the Yang family? Man Bao and Bai Shan, who understood the meaning of his retreat, looked at him sympathetically and said, let's go, because Lord Yang is more than just thinking of you as a supporter, and you are a prince who has not opened a palace. Which is more important than the Yang family? If it was in the past, the three Manbao might think they were the princes, but now. The fifth prince understood what they meant, his face changed constantly, and finally he looked deeply at Manbao and said, "You swear by your friendship with Mingda Changjiao that you didn't lie to me or harm me." Manbao immediately raised his hand and swore, "If we lied to you and hurt you, then Mingda Changjiao and I would not be able to be friends anymore. But is this oath really useful?" Just thinking about it, Mingda and Chang Yu jumped out from the side and shouted, "Okay, you swear by us." When Manbao saw them, he immediately waved, "Come here and persuade the fifth prince to go to Yang mansion to see Brother Yang. Brother Yang has prepared a whole deer to roast venison." Mingda and Chang Yu were distracted and asked, "Do you bake it yourself?" Manbao nodded, "That's right." After thinking about it, Mingda said to the fifth prince, "Five brother, let's go have a look." The father said that Yang Changbo is the best disciple of each family, and even the prince's brother praised him. Such a person would. What's wrong with us? Chang Yu agreed in her heart as early as when Manbao said it. She also looked at her clothes and felt that she was dressed properly. She reached out and touched her hair and asked Manbao, "Is there any hair in my hair?" Chaos. Manbao said, "Yang Suiseo is also there, holding the child." Chang Yu was dignified and reserved on the whole, but he couldn't help but glance at her and said, "I'm just going to eat, not to do anything." The fifth prince was also curious about the conflict between Yang Heshu and his father. The main reason was that he was not involved in politics yet, so he didn't know many things. His mother received limited information. He only knew that when the emperor's sister-in-law gave birth last month, someone after changing Zhou Man's needle bag, he wanted to kill the emperor's sister-in-law and the emperor's grandson, and the man finally found out that his uncle Qin had placed it in the palace. The fifth prince looked back at his mansion, cleared his throat and said, "Okay, then let's take a look." The group turned around and went out, just at the side door to see Yang Hoye, who had left and returned. As soon as the two sides met, Manbao took the initiative to bring the two junior brothers to salute Yang Howe first, smilingly, "Yang Howe, we are going to your house." Yang Howe was stunned, "Go to my house?" Everyone nodded together, and the fifth prince asked curiously, "Why did the uncle come back? But what did you forget?" Yang Howe returned to his senses and said with a smile, "Oh, nothing important, just suddenly remembered to tell His Highness to return to the palace earlier, so as not to worry about His Majesty and Empress in the palace. After all, His Highness also brought out two princesses and the sixth prince. You are a brother, you should be more considerate." The fifth prince just remembered, turned his head and asked Mingda and Changjiao, "By the way, where's the sixth?" It was only then that Mingda and Chang Yu remembered, "Oops, we haven't seen you for a long time, so we have to come to find you and let him wait for us in the garden. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1768. When the group found the backyard, the sixth prince was squatting honestly by the pool in the garden and playing with the mud. He knew it was dirty, so he didn't use his hands, so he poked the mud with a stick to play. Hearing the sound of running, he glanced back and immediately threw the stick in his hand into the pool, then wiped his body and stood up, pretending that nothing had happened. He quietly breathed a sigh of relief following the servant who served him, and followed the little master forward. The fifth prince was relieved when he saw that the old sixth was safe and sound, and then dragged him out together. Yang Howe still couldn't calm down, and asked, "Why did the fifth highness think of going to my house?" The fifth prince glanced at Bai Shan and Zhou Man, then lied without changing his face, "This is my first time working outside the palace, I want to be more thoughtful, so as not to neglect my younger sisters and younger brothers." Bai Shan said that my cousin is there. There is a banquet at home to entertain guests, we want to join in the fun. Why, isn't uncle welcome? Yang Howe smiled and said, "Why are you unwelcome? You can come, and uncle is only happy. Let's go, let's go together. It's just that he is not only a little uneasy, but also a little aggrieved. If he knows that he will go to Yang's house, does he need to come to see him secretly? Yang Hui lowered his eyes, remembering his son's stubbornness, and was a little unsure whether to let them meet. It's just that people walked directly towards Yang's house when they went out, leaving him not long to think about it. The group quickly arrived outside the Yang residence, and Yang Hesha seemed to have received the news in advance, and stood at the door with Tang He to greet the 4 princes and princesses. The 6th prince was the youngest. He looked around and asked the 5th prince, "5th brother, why are we here?" The 5th prince lowered his voice and said, "Eat roast meat, roast venison." The 6th prince's eyes lit up and asked, "Bake it yourself?" The 5th prince nodded. The 6th prince immediately stopped asking, and began to stare at Yang Heshu with great interest. Chang Yu was also staring at Yang Heshu, but she didn't dare to look openly, so she stood between Manbao and Mingda, occasionally raising her head to take a look, then lowered her head and snickered for a while, then raised her head to look. Mingda and Manbao. The two of them turned their heads and looked at her for a while silently, then turned away silently, wanting to pretend they didn't know her. Yang Hui had already instructed the housekeeper to arrange the banquet, while Yang Heshu led them directly to the viewing tower, and said with a smile, "It will take some time for the kitchen to prepare lunch, so we can grill some meat first." Mingda and the 6th prince, who were rushing to the barbecue, nodded again and again, without any opinion. The 5th prince and Chang Yu, who came to Yang Heshu, had no objections. They didn't even look at the Yang Hoya next to them, they turned around and followed Yang Heshu to the observation tower. After instructing the housekeeper some precautions, Yang Hui, who only had time to see their backs, said. He knew that as long as his son was there, those children wouldn't talk by his side. Yang Hui hesitated for a while, and after hesitatingly inserted it, he hesitated for a while between letting the young people play together, and then shook his head, summoning a confidant, "You go to the observation tower to serve, be sure to take good care of the princes and princesses." Mammy responded with a sound and was about to retreat, when Yang Hui suddenly lowered his voice and said, "Look at the uncle and the 5th prince. If they talk together, try to separate them." Mammy was stunned for a moment, then she responded in cold sweat. It was impossible to separate them, because without waiting for the Mammy to catch up, Yang Hesha stopped and said to Tang He Bashan and others on the way to lead them to the observation tower, "You take care of the 6th prince and the other 2 on my behalf." "Princess, your Royal Highness, I have a few jars of Zhuangyuan wine there. My grandfather buried it after I was born, and I have never finished drinking it. You are going to open the palace now. I have nothing else to give you, so how about 2 jars of Zhuangyuan wine?" The 5th prince froze for a moment and then nodded. So Yang Hesha took the 5th prince away halfway, and they were followed by each other's confidants. It was nothing if not. After walking for a while, Yang Hesha waved at the back, so Wan Tian and the 5th prince's chamberlain stopped, only far away. "Follow." Yang Hesha didn't go back to his yard directly to get the wine, but led the 5th prince to walk around the yard slowly. He asked, "Your Highness, has my father mentioned the matter of making the concubine take the blame?" The 5th prince was taken aback. "What?" Yang Hesha knew when he saw his reaction. He breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Is that asking His Royal Highness to send a letter to the concubine?" The 5th prince couldn't help but touched his chest. Yang Hesha glanced at the placket of his clothes, looked away, and said, "Do you want to take it apart, Your Highness? The letter may be to persuade Empress to take the blame." The 5th prince stared at Yang Hesha suspiciously, puzzled. "Could your cousin and eldest uncle not get along?" Yang Hesha gave a wry smile, still insisting, "Don't you have a look at the 5th Highness?" The face of the 5th prince changed, and after a long time, he took out the thick letter from his arms and opened it under the clear eyes of Yang Hesha. He glanced at 10 lines, and the more he looked, the more ugly his face became. After a long time, when he saw the last page, he couldn't help tearing up the letter in his hand and looked at Yang Heshu angrily. What does Yang Hui mean? Let me mother-in-law to replace Yang Rong. Yang Heshu sighed and said, my father thinks that His Majesty is kind to his family. Empress and His Highness recognize this matter. His Majesty has no excuse to seize the Yang family, and can protect your uncle's family. But my mother-in-law and I are innocent. Yes, your Majesty also knows this, Yang Heshu said. This is also the two reasons why I disagree with my father's actions. The Empress and Her Royal Highness are completely innocent, and there is no need for you to feel wronged for your uncle and uncle. Your Majesty knows the inside story. If he knows that his father and uncle have harassed the Empress and His Highness, he will only be more angry. Although I have lost the evidence at this time, I can't do anything with the Yang family, but if the Yang family makes mistakes again in the future, His Majesty will definitely settle the old and new accounts together. He sighed, it's a pity that my father doesn't listen to me, I can only pass the white paper. Shan and the others found His Highness to make a petition, and asked His Highness and Empress to keep silent, just pretend they don't know anything, and leave everything to Dali Temple and the imperial court. The angry fifth prince calmed down a little, stared at Yang Heshu and asked, Yang Rong, will my uncle's family be raided and wiped out? Yang Heshu smiled and shook his head, where do you want to go, Your Highness? I am also a member of the Yang family. If the family is wiped out, where can I stand here and talk to you at this time? He paused and said, however, the uncle's side may be exiled, but no matter what, there will always be the Empress and Her Royal Highness in the palace, and our father and son outside the palace. Stray outside. The fifth prince breathed a sigh of relief, looking at the torn letterhead in his hand, and a little annoyed. How could the eldest uncle and uncle come up with such a solution? Isn't this harming me and my mother-in-law? See you at 11 o'clock. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1769. Yang Heshu said calmly, Father and uncle are careless, they are also thinking about His Majesty's love for His Majesty, but father has forgotten one thing, His Majesty is His Majesty's son, and the Crown Prince is also His Majesty's son. I think, under His Majesty in my heart, Your Highness, you and the Crown Prince are brothers, and he is father and son, and you are a family. If he knew that His Highness chose to deceive his father and brother for the sake of his cousin, His Majesty and the Crown Prince would hurt you again, and the hearts of people in this world can't hurt the most, even father and son. The fifth prince pondered. After a while, he looked up at Yang Heshu suspiciously, with some hesitation on his face, but he couldn't help but ask, won't my cousin's disobedience to eldest uncle hurt his heart? Yang Heshu sighed and said, I'm also doing this for filial piety. If my parents are wrong, I should persuade them to be right. This is filial piety. Otherwise, I know that what he has done will harm the Empress and Her Royal Highness, as well as the Yang family. I'm afraid my father can't restrain himself, this is unfilial. When the fifth prince heard this, he nodded and said, I understand, cousin, thank you for reminding me, I know what to do. Yang Heshu's eyes were gentle, he reached out and patted his shoulder, and sighed deeply. Hearing this sigh, the fifth prince felt that he had the same disease and pity for each other, so he said, cousin, I heard people say that you were also implicated in this matter, and you are about to be demoted and released. Yang Heshu smiled gently, this is not a big deal, just start all over again. He looked at the fifth prince, then patted him on the shoulder after being silent for a while and said, it was my cousin and my cousin who did it wrong. They gave birth to him not long after you were born, but at that time, Your Majesty has appointed a prince. Now the Crown Prince is studying hard again, and he has been praised a lot in the past 6 months. Now that he has given birth to the eldest son, he has a stable position, and even Prince Gong has retreated a shot. Uncle Tang should not have such delusions. Come. The fifth prince's face was pale, and he shook his lips and asked, so uncle is still because of me? No, Yang Hesha said grimly, if it was for his highness, wouldn't he ask for the consent of the empress and his highness? Then why did he? If his highness takes the throne, then he will be Uncle Guo. Yang Hesha directly pierced the window paper and said bluntly, Uncle Tang is not an official in the court, and his relatives will be his highest status. The fifth prince turned pale, and after a while, he looked at Yang Hesha and asked, then cousin doesn't want to be a relative? Yang Hesha didn't answer whether he wanted to or not, but said meaningfully, with my ability, whether I can do it or not, it mainly depends on whether his highness has a chance. So it's because he didn't have a chance. The fifth prince gave a wry smile. Although he didn't have that thought, he couldn't help being hit. Yang Hesha patted him on the shoulder again, and said with a smile, let's go, cousin invites you to eat venison. The fifth prince was in a better mood, and glanced at the letter that was torn in half in his hand. Yang Hesha stretched out his hand and said, leave it to me, lest you be burdened with it. The fifth prince gave him all the stationery in his hand. Yang Hesha carefully folded it, then stuffed it into the money bag and put it away. When they got to the observation tower, they were eating lively inside, and a few manbao were teaching Mingda Changjiao and the sixth prince to roast meat. As soon as Yang Hesha went upstairs, Chang Yu, who was eating so much, was choked. She grabbed the handkerchief in Mingda's hand and wiped her mouth. Then she straightened her back and raised her neck slightly. Zi covered his mouth before starting to chew. Minda. Mrs. Yang. Crowd. Everyone looked at her silently, and they could only look down at the meat in their hands. Mingda realized that he had been scalded. Bai Erlang sat beside her and handed over a handkerchief when he saw it. Mingda took it, thanked him, and continued to eat, and gave a place to the fifth brother who came back. Fifth brother, the venison from Mr. Yang's family is very delicious. The reserved Chang Yu nodded again and again. Mrs. Yang stood up and pulled Yang Hesha, who had entered the room. Is your husband hungry? I baked a few pieces, how about you taste? Chang Yu's eyes fell on Mrs. Yang, and she said somewhat reservedly, I also want to eat a piece. Mrs. Yang gave Chang Yu a generous smile, clipped a piece to her, and said with a big smile, Princess, taste the taste of my roast. Man Bao, who was beside him, couldn't help but stay away from Madame Yang and Chang Yu, sitting directly in the way of Bai Shan. Bai Shan looked up at the two of them and let her suffer. Mrs. Tang has long since seen it strange, Chang Yu is just a little girl, Kui does not know how many roles she has dealt with more powerful than her. Yang Hesha sat next to Mrs. Yang, took the plate from her hand, nodded slightly to the two princesses, and then went to the sixth prince to speak, Sixth Highness, you are still young, so you can't eat too much barbecue. The sixth prince was eating happily with Tang Run, and Master Tang was also happy to feed him. Hearing the words, he glanced at the plate in front of the sixth prince. The sixth prince pointed at Bai Shan and the others, they also ate a lot. Bai Shan, we are older than you. Man Bao, I'm a doctor. Bai Erlang, I am strong. Mingda couldn't help looking up at the three of them. The sixth prince's gaze turned to Tang Run, who was sitting with him. Tang Run stuffed a piece of meat into his mouth, quietly moved away from him, and got closer to his father. I often eat barbecue. The voice just fell. Mrs. Tang had already snatched the plate from his hand, glared at Master Tang and carried her son over. You have eaten enough today, you are not allowed to eat more. Tang Run looked at his father with tears in his eyes. His father showed sympathy to him, and then ate all the meat on his plate, expressing loyalty to his daughter-in-law. Tang Run was very angry and looked at everyone tearfully. Man Bao felt that he was very pitiful, he hesitated and glanced at Madame Tang, and did not dare to give him something to eat in front of his mother. Not only Tang Run, but also the meat on the sixth prince's plate can't be added. The fifth prince restrained him, "You rarely eat this in the palace, what if you eat it and break your stomach?" When Man Bao heard this, he felt that he had to perform his duties as an imperial physician, so he said to Mingda, "You should eat less, your stomach is worse than the sixth prince." Minda. She stared at the plate in Man Bao's hand and asked, "Shouldn't you lead by example?" Man Bao was very reluctant to see the meat on the plate, so Bai Shan took the initiative to take 2 pieces from her plate and ate it, leaving only 1 piece for her. "That's fine, you don't have to worry about it." Man Bao. Seeing that 4 of the children were about to cry, Yang Hesha smiled and said, "Let's move to the dining room, this barbecue is just for fun." Chang Yu, who had been peeking at Yang Heshu and forgot to eat the meat, suddenly regretted it. He felt that the meat on the shelf was too fragrant, so he didn't bother to peek at Yang Heshu, but stared straight at the meat on the shelf. See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1770. Chang Yu was reluctant to leave. Seeing everyone got up, she couldn't help but stare at the piece of venison that was still roasting on the shelf after struggling for a while. Mingda had put down the plate and stretched out his hand to pull her. "Let's go, let the servants clean up these things." Chang Yu burst into tears. Seeing that many people turned to look at her, she could only put down the plate and followed. She was still a little uneasy until she had lunch, and she felt very sad. Venison in the palace is not rare, but roasting venison, sitting on the side and roasting it by herself is too rare, even rarer than seeing Yang Heshu. Chang Yu's expression was gloomy, so he could only take a peek at Yang Heshu before getting into the car, but unfortunately he couldn't heal his heart. Yang Heshu was accustomed to turning a blind eye to these eyes. He only talked to the 5th prince and the 6th prince, telling them that it was getting late and should return to the palace earlier. Yang Hui is an elder, and it is not easy to send people out in person, so he stood on a high place and watched his son send people away one by one. "I don't know what Chang Bo and the 5th prince said." The servant lowered his head and said softly, "Yes, only Wan Tian was with the uncle in the mansion at that time. And Wan Tian is Yang Heshu's confidant, he will definitely not tell Yang Hui the truth." Marquis Yang sighed and had already guessed whether his plan was successful or not. Seeing that Yang Heshu at the door had sent Tang He and others away, the couple turned around and returned to the house. He stood and looked at it for a while before saying, "Let Chang Bo come to my study, forget it, go and see where he went, I'll go look for him." Yang Heshu separated from his wife at the second gate and asked her to go back to see the children, while he turned around and went to his study. Wan Tian asked his servants to light a brazier and bring them in, fearing that he would be too cold, so he would cover his legs with blankets. Yang Heshu waved his hand, "No need, you go down, if father comes, let him come in directly." "Yes," Wan Tian answered and then bowed and stepped back. Yang Heshu sat on the chair, pondered for a moment, took out the money bag from his sleeve, and when he tore it apart, inside was the letter paper that the 5th prince had torn apart. He took it out, put it into the brazier piece by piece and burned it. By the time Marquis Yang strode in from outside, not much of Yang Heshu was left. When he saw the stationery in Yang Heshu's hand, he asked with a gloomy expression, "What is this?" Yang Heshu didn't get up, and continued to put the letter paper in his hand into the brazier. He said, "It's the letter that my father asked the 5th prince to pass to the concubine." Yang Hui was very angry, his anger surged, and he stepped forward and asked angrily, "What are you doing?" Yang Heshu raised his head, looked at Lord Yang sadly and said, "Father, you taught your son, gentleman Fang Zhang, what are you doing now?" Yang Hui opened his mouth, and after a while, he said dryly, "I'm here for the clan." Yang Heshu said, "For the sake of the clan, it shouldn't be like this. Your Majesty is not a fool. He knows who did it." Your introduction of the noble concubine and the fifth prince will only make His Majesty even more angry. Yang Hui said coldly, the emperor's heart is important, but it's not so important that he has to. But do you know what will happen if the crime falls on your cousin? He said, let's not talk about the real estate and land under their name. Our Yang family's salt and grain business in the Jiangnan area is in his hands. If we don't save him, Yang's family will lose at least half of his money. Yang Hesha said indifferently, if we break it, we will break it. We are a family of farming and education, so we shouldn't be too extravagant. That part of the business was originally done 10 years ago, and we can go back to 10 years ago. It's easy to say, what kind of things in this clan don't need money? Not to mention, you can show off your skills in Lujiang County because you don't need money from your family, and after returning to Beijing, what kind of management does not need money? Father, that's what you do when you have money, and there are ways to do it without money. Yang Hui saw that he said it indifferently, and said angrily, what you are wearing? Yang Hesha said lightly, my son can also wear coarse clothes. Yang Hui, are you going to be mad as a father? Yang Hesha shook his head, father, son, this is also for the good of the family. Yang Hui couldn't help stomping his feet. He looked out, but couldn't help closing the door and whispering to him, my father taught me wrong, I only wanted you to be a loyal gentleman since I was a child, but I forgot to teach you about this world. Of some rules. Yang Heshu looked at his father helplessly, is his father treating him as a simple baby? Yang Hui didn't understand his gaze, so he paused and continued, there is a lot involved in this. The business in Jiangnan is not only our family, but also other families. If your Majesty can seize the handle and put us in Jiangnan, do you know what will happen if someone pulls it out? His Majesty's manpower will enter, and each family may shed their anger on our family. That's all. Almost half of our family's money is invested there. Once we lose Jiangnan's money, we Hungnong Yang the clan may also lose its place in the clan's annals. Yang Hui seemed to have aged several years, and he sighed, do you think the status of the noble family is immutable? Look at the Kui family, but there are no outstanding disciples in the 2 generations, and His Majesty has been dropped from the 1st rank to the 3rd rank. The various families are holding grievances for their Kui clan on the face, but they are mostly ridiculed in their hearts. It was him, although he recognized Kui clan's heritage and teachings to the female relatives, but he still looked down on them faintly, and felt that their prosperity in the past few generations was almost supported by the women in the family, not the men. But that's it, Kui's family has not been expelled from the family's interest chain. If Yang's manpower and property in Jiangnan are taken over by the emperor. Yang Hui fought a cold war, grabbed Yang Heshu, stared at him and said solemnly, Changbo, it's right to listen to your father, the game between kings and ministers sometimes depends on the strength of their own hands, and the emperor's heart is not as important as you think. Once the Yang family loses power, the most important thing for us is not to face His Majesty's reckoning, but to various families, you know. If Kui's family hadn't been supported by the hostess all over the back houses, their family would have been squeezed out of each family long ago. You don't have so many aunts and sisters. The Kui family has many daughters, and has been keen to marry each family since 3 generations ago. Their daughters teach well, and they are almost popular candidates for the eldest daughter-in-law of each family. At that time, the emperor wanted to marry the daughter of the Kui family for the prince, but because Kuiji said something unpleasant when he was out drinking, the prince heard it. Therefore, the prince swore that he would not marry the daughter of the Kui family. Later, the emperor did not choose the crown prince from the family, but chose the Su family from the generals he followed. And the Kui family also felt offended, and let them go. The Kui family's daughter did not marry the royal family, so she faintly disliked Li's meaning. Otherwise, when the 5th prince said that they were kissing, both Yang Gaifei and Yang side tended to favor Kui. Ladies. The Kui family can rely on their daughters to maintain their status, but the Yang family can't. They don't have so many daughters. Yang Hesha said indifferently, Yang's family has me, as well as cousin Ji and the others. There are many outstanding disciples of Yang's family. See you at 4 p.m.